All right. So, good morning. Here we are at Friday again. I don't know if you remember story time from back when we were in the classroom, but I thought I would start today by reading just a couple pages to you from one of my favorite books. Um, the last topic we did focused on what an organ is and then got into the issue of organ donation. So this talks about that little piece. And then we're going to talk about organ systems. Today I'm going to introduce to you the different organ systems. And then we'll work through the next bit of the course on talking about some of those systems and the connections between them. Okay, so you can just get comfy. You're just going to listen for a little bit. Or I guess if you want to skip it, you can fast forward. But it's only 2 pages that I'm going to read to you. And it's linked to last lesson. So here we go. 2 days before Christmas in 1954, Richard Eric of Marlborough, Massachusetts, was on the brink of death from kidney failure at the age of just 23 when he was given his life back by becoming the world's first kidney transplant recipient. Eric, I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, was exceedingly lucky because he had an identical twin, Ronald, so had a donor with a perfect tissue match. Even so, no one had ever attempted anything like this before, and his doctors weren't at all sure what the outcome would be. One distinct possibility was that both brothers might die. As Dr. Joseph Murray, the lead surgeon, explained years later, none of us had ever asked a healthy person to accept this magnitude of risk solely for the sake of someone else. Happily, the outcome proved better than anyone had dared hope, indeed, had a certain fairy tale quality to it. Richard Eric not only survived the operation and regained his health, but married his nurse and had 2 children with her. He lived 8 years more before the original disease, glomerulonephritis, I know I mispronounced that, reasserted itself and killed him. His brother Ronald lived another 56 years with his one kidney. Eric's surgeon, Dr. Joseph Murray, was awarded a Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine in 1990, though mostly for his later work on immunosuppression. Um, and that is when you work to sort of dampen the immune response or calm it down to allow these things to happen. Problems with rejection, however, meant that most other attempts at transplants failed. Over the following decade, 211 people underwent kidney transplants, and most lived for no more than a few weeks. If that, only 6 survived for as much as a year, and in most of those cases, because the donor was also a twin. It wasn't until the development of the miracle drug cyclosporine from a soil sample that was fortuitously collected on a Norwegian holiday, and there's more to that story, that transplants could start to become routine. So the twin advantage is that your DNA is identical. It's the point of an identical twin. And so everything in terms of your body should match. When you try to do a transplant with anyone else, obviously they're not DNA identical. It's not an exact match. So your body recognizes that as foreign and will attack. And that's where the immune response comes in. And that's why you have to suppress the immune response. And that's what this drug could do. Advances in transplant surgery over the past few decades have been breathtaking. Today in the United States, this is an American-based book, of the 30,000 people who receive an organ transplant each year, over 95% are still alive 12 months later, and 80% are alive 5 years later. The downside is that demand for replacement organs far outstrips supply. As of late 2018, 114,000 people were on the transplant waiting lists in the United States. A new person joins the list every 10 minutes, and 20 people a day die before a donated organ can be found. People on dialysis live an extra 8 years on average, but that rises to 23 years with a transplant. So we'll talk about that possibly later. About a third of kidney transplants come from living donors, typically a close relative, but all other transplanted organs are from deceased donors, which is a real challenge. Anyone who needs an organ has to hope that someone dies in circumstances that leave a harvestable organ of the right size, that the victim isn't too far away, and that there are 2 teams of surgical specialists standing by, one to remove the necessary organ from the donor and another to reinstall it in the recipient. The median waiting time for a kidney transplant in the United States is 3.6 years, up from 2.9 years in 2004, but many people can't wait that long. In the United States, 7,000 people a year on average die before they can receive a transplant. One possible solution would be to use animal transplants. Organs taken from pigs could be grown to the right size, then harvested at will. Transplant surgeries could be scheduled instead of treated as emergencies. It is a wonderful solution in principle, but in practice, it throws up 2 main problems. One is that organs from another animal species provoke a savage immune response. If there is one thing your immune system knows, it is that you shouldn't have a pig's liver inside you. And the second is that pigs are full of something called porcine endogenous retroviruses, which could infect any humans into which they are introduced. There are hopes that both problems can be overcome in the near future, which could transform prospects for thousands of people. A separate and no less intractable problem is that immunosuppressive drugs are not ideal for several reasons. To begin with, they affect the entire immune system, not just the transplanted part. So the patient is left permanently vulnerable to infections and to cancers, which the immune system would normally tackle, and the drugs can also be toxic. Luckily, most of us will never need a transplant. Okay, so that summarizes a bunch of things, including some answers I asked you to get from different sources, some of those Canadian, based on things I attached to the last lesson. Okay, so now we're going to switch over then to the note for today. So if you want to get your paper and pen ready, and it's not going to be super long, it's going to be a chart, and it's just going to introduce you to what the organ systems are, some potentially different names and how they can be counted differently, and their main function or role. So what I just read you was an example of an organ. It's mostly, although it talked in general about transplants, kidney. And so you'll see that kidney is an organ that's going to come up as critical to one of the systems. So what I'm going to try to do so you can make connections, let's call this organ systems, is have the chart say what the system is, give you an example of something that's a piece of that system, whether it's an organ or some other tissue type, and then its main role. And I'm going to keep it really short and sweet. Oh, sorry, itchy nose, allergies. And then I've attached a short video clip from National Geographic, which is great at talking you through the systems and visualizing it, because I'm not going to draw them out. And I think it's a good short clip to summarize everything. And also the connections between them, which is going to be super important. So nothing works in isolation. Everything works together. And it kind of does a really good job of describing how the systems work together in our body. Okay, so let's do the headings. I'm going to call, the first column is going to be system. And then I'm going to just call this major organs. I'll do this, major organs / tissues. So I'll give you an example of something that you might be familiar with that is part of that system. And then we'll do its function. And we're simplifying, okay? Keeping it simple. So everything is more complex than we ever do, but this is just your introduction. Okay, I'm just gonna keep a list here so I don't forget any. Let's start with skeletal. All right, and so when we talk about the skeletal system, we're talking, of course, about your bones. So I'm just gonna leave that there. That says bones. It's also like your joints and your cartilage and stuff like that, other materials like that. And the primary function of the skeletal system is support. So to attach all the other bits and pieces to, have you upright, create your form, all that kind of stuff. So if you are interested in the skeleton and knowing all the bones and knowing how joints work and things like that, you're going to see that come up in kinesiology. Of course, you can take in grade 12 if that's of interest to you. Okay. Next, we'll do muscular. Sometimes these are hooked together. So depending on where you go to read about these things or look at how things are categorized, they might not use exactly the same name. So I'll try and give you an alternate when I see it, and also point out how sometimes they group them together. So sometimes you'll see these two put together. So these are the muscles in your body because the muscles are connected to the bones. Okay, they're anchored to them. And so together they sort of do the joint things of support and movement, which I'm going to put here. Once again, muscles are something that are talked a lot about in biology, in the courses we have in biology, but it's also in kinesiology. Those two things together, because kinesiology is all about movement, and these two things together give us our support and our movement. Okay, circulatory, also called the cardiovascular system. So that can have the same two names. So maybe you think of a hospital and like a cardio unit or something like that, or cardiologist. It's all, there's the cardiovascular and or circulatory. They're sort of interchangeable. So the main organ here is the heart. We are going to do this system in a little bit more detail, and then in grade 11 you'll do it in a lot more detail. So this would be the heart and the blood vessels that transport blood throughout your body. And I use the word transport, so I'm going to use that over here as my summary one, transport. So circulatory system is all about moving things around your body. So that would be the blood and also stuff that's dissolved in the blood. So nutrients from your food, and obviously oxygen is also helpful to get rid of waste. We will, like I said, do that in more detail, but it's all about moving everything around your body. Okay, lymphatic. Sometimes also referred to as your immune system. Like this one, it's about moving stuff around your body, but the point is to fight infection, fight off things that aren't supposed to be there. In the case of cancer, the reason your body doesn't fight it off is because it's your own cells, so it doesn't recognize it as foreign. In the case of organ donation, which is another thing we've talked about, your immune system responds to the organ because it is not part of you, and so it thinks it should attack for obvious reasons. So let's just put in here your lymph nodes. That might be something that you're aware of before. If you're sick, you can you get like sometimes you can feel your lymph nodes inflamed because things are ramped up and working in there. And it is about immunity. Let's put fighting infection, actually. Might be more familiar terms. Okay, fighting infection and then protecting you in the future from the same viruses and infections that you've had before. That's what immunity is, okay? Being immune to it, being protected from it. All right, respiratory system. Okay, main organ in here that you are probably familiar with are your lungs. And so, like, you're going to see these things are all connected. Can't have one working without the other. So these two are quite connected in that you have to get oxygen into your body, comes into the lungs. Your lungs are wrapped in blood vessels, and that blood will then carry the oxygen to every single cell in your body. So the main purpose of your lungs and this system is to exchange O2, which is oxygen, and CO2, which is carbon dioxide. So we'll talk in more detail about this one. So we'll be coming back to this one as well as the next one. So the three that we hit the most right now, and also you talk about again in a lot more detail in grade 11, circulatory, respiratory, digestive. They are the big three for grade 11. Okay, so the digestive system is going to have lots of things you're familiar with for organs. I'm going to put stomach. There's also your small, large intestine. There's some accessory organs we'll talk about, like pancreas and gallbladder and liver and things like that. But the main function here is to absorb nutrients. So get everything you need out of your food and into your circulatory system. Once again, there's an overlap to take those nutrients to every single cell in your body. Okay. All right. We're going to look at the next three are ones that are focused on a lot in grade 12, if you get that far, if you choose to go that far. So you'll talk a little bit about immune system, lymphatic in grade 12, but not as much as you will the next three. So urinary is also called excretory. Okay, so it has interchangeable terms. And this is a system, as it kind of implies with this name, that generates your urine. So this is where the kidney is, the organ that was just discussed the most in terms of transplants and living donors and stuff like that. And so this is all about removal of waste from the blood. Removal of waste from the blood. Okay, and that's what creates your urine. So the kidneys will clean your blood basically and take those waste products. You store it in your bladder, and then when the time is right, you pee out all those waste products. So that's a system you talk about in grade 12, more so than you'll see us talk about it now or in grade 11. Another one is the nervous system, really saved for grade 12. And so key organ here would be your brain. Also in here would be your spinal cord and all those nerves that connect to those two pieces. And really this one is about controlling the body's activities. Controlling body. Well, I don't even need activities. It's all about messaging and making sure everything's doing what it's supposed to be doing and responding in the appropriate way to the things that are happening, either on the outside or on the inside of the body. Okay, and then endocrine, Endocrine. This is all about your hormones. And so there's lots of glands. I was trying to think of one that you might, some people know this one. Thyroid gland is an example of something in there. And these are sites in your body that produce and or release hormones to travel throughout and create change and respond. So I'm going to put here it also as part of controlling the body. And I'm going to put, I'll just do it in brackets down here, hormones. So this one's through nervous impulses, right, through your nerves, and this one's through the release of hormones. And hormones can dramatically increase and decrease. They can make lots of changes, okay? And then two more. So reproductive. Don't spend a lot of time on this one. You might see it a little bit in grade 12 again because of the connection to hormones that are also in the reproductive system. But you should have got lots of education so far on the reproductive system because it is one of those things you start talking about early on in your education to make sure that you make educated, informed choices with respect to being aware of how this works. So an example of an organ in here, if you're female, might be your ovaries. Okay, and if you're a male, the testes. And the purpose of the system is what it says it is. Okay. Reproduction, make the next generation. Okay. All right, the last one is sometimes included and sometimes it's not, depending on the list you look at. So I've got 10 so far. The 11th one and the final one on our page, it's integumentary, INTEGUMENTARY. And this is sort of what's on the surface. So your skin, You include your hair and your nails and things like that, these types of features. And the one thing that's most important about this is mostly protection. But also I'm going to put in here sensory. So thinking about your skin is a really effective barrier to prevent things from getting into your bloodstream and causing issues there. That's why when you get a cut or a scratch or a burn and you lose your skin, you're really susceptible to infections. So your skin's wonderful at that, but also your skin helps you sense your environment. So hot, cold, and all those different pieces that go with touch and feel and detecting your external environment. Okay, so those are the systems. You've got your list there and a really simplified explanation. The next thing you're going to do is watch that short video, less than 5 minutes, which will give you a visual on these things. And then explain sort of in general how they're connected and work together. And then moving into the next bit of material, which will be next week. Like I said, I'm going to start looking a little bit closer at the circulatory system, the digestive system, and the respiratory system as where I go to next. So that's it for today. I will talk to you again soon. Okay. And just shut her down. All right. Take care, guys.